My mother told me this story not too long ago. It happened about 10 years ago. My cousin was 17 or 18 years old when she was in a car crash. She was badly injured and taken to the hospital. She fought for her life for 2 weeks, but sadly, she passed away. Her death was a huge loss for our family. We were all heartbroken. She was especially close to my dad's sister, our aunt. She spent a lot of time with her and loved babysitting her children. My aunt had young kids, no older than 4, and my cousin cared for them often. They loved her, and she loved them. Before my cousin's accident, my aunt's house was under construction. The renovation work started before she passed away and continued after. Many workers were coming and going during this time. The house was a busy place, with people working in different rooms every day. One day, while my aunt was at work, she received a phone call. It was from one of the construction workers. He sounded frustrated. He told her that a teenage girl kept showing up at the house. She was walking around the construction site, appearing multiple times a week. He said it had been happening for a few weeks. My aunt was confused. She asked what the girl looked like. The worker gave a detailed description. She had long brown hair, a red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. When my aunt heard this, she froze. The description was exact. It matched my cousin perfectly. The same long brown hair, the same red cap she always wore, the same denim overalls, and the same white jacket. But my cousin had passed away weeks before. My aunt didn't know what to say. She took a deep breath and thanked the worker. She told him she would look into it. She hung up the phone and sat there, trying to process what she had just heard. When she got home that evening, she searched for a picture of my cousin. She found one where my cousin was wearing the same outfit the worker had described. It was undeniable. It was her. The next day, my aunt took the picture to the construction site. She showed it to the workers. They all looked at the photo carefully. Then, one by one, they all agreed. "That's her," they said. "That's the girl we've been seeing." They had no idea that she had passed away weeks earlier. This story really shook me when I first heard it. My family had never believed in ghosts or anything paranormal. Nothing like this had ever happened to us before. We were not the kind of people to tell ghost stories or believe in supernatural things. But this was different. Multiple people saw her. They described her exactly, down to the clothes she always wore. They had no way of knowing who she was or that she had died. To this day, none of us can explain it. But my aunt, the workers, and our whole family believed that my cousin's spirit was still there. Maybe she was checking on the house. Maybe she was watching over my aunt's children, the ones she had loved so much. Whatever the reason, she was seen. And that is something we can never forget. I was living in an apartment in Oslo. It had an odd sensation. There were 3 of us, 2 girls and me. The structure was old, from the mid-1800s. And there were strange events there. One room felt out of place. Even when the rest of the flat was warm, it was always frigid. Every time I stepped inside, unsettling thoughts crept into my mind. I pictured children in peril, crying. I couldn't explain why, but the sensation was strong. I never wanted to stay in that room for long. Before, my bedroom had been the living room. One morning, I woke up to a horrible sound. A deep growl like that of a big cat or an enraged dog. I tried to move. I couldn't. Something was holding me down, dragging me into the bed. Though I saw nothing, the fear was real. I was trapped, pinned down, unable to move. My chest tightened. My breathing grew shallow. I started to panic. One of the girls I lived with had a cat, just a year old. Young. We were all lounging around one evening when we heard something terrible. A sound from the bathroom. We rushed in. The cat lay on the ground, its tongue hanging out, gasping for breath. The noises it made were awful. It struggled, body twitching, fighting for air. We stood there, helpless. 10 minutes. It lasted 10 minutes. And then silence. No one spoke. No one moved. It was sudden and unsettling. Not long after that, I moved out. I had never believed in ghosts, never thought much about the supernatural. I was a skeptic. But that place had an energy I couldn't ignore. It made me uncomfortable in a way I had never felt before. Even today, I don't know what to believe. But I still remember the cold room. I still remember being trapped in my bed. I still remember the growl. And I still remember the cat begging for life and dying for no apparent reason. I have no explanation for any of it. But I know what I felt. And I never want to feel it again. I had a great friend in high school who lived next to a house that was constantly under auction. People would leave silently in the middle of the night, and for a few years, the owner had not been there for more than 6 months straight. We were really bored one night, and he advised we investigate the property next door, as it had been vacant for some time. We return, and he unlocks the dog door he can crawl through and lets me in. The home itself is not particularly noteworthy. My friend's house was similarly constructed. It appeared to be built in perhaps the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, better part of town. There was a great built-in breakfast table in the kitchen placed against a picture window. Though the house's electricity was off, the window let you see the streetlight. My friend and I settled down on the floor across from this table and are just chatting. Why? Who wonders? My companion yells all of a sudden, and my eyesight blackens at that same moment. I not only lost my sight, but also felt a horrible chill all around. I start screaming, and then I feel my friend's hand grasping mine and dragging me roughly in some way. It was December and should have been far warmer inside of that house. My vision gradually returns, and I start to warm up as I realize we are outside under the streetlight. At last I turn to see my pal looking terrified. I finally ask him what happened. I'm somewhat perplexed and sort of scared myself. As I was speaking, he claims a dark monster crept out from beneath the table and sat on top of me, just vaguely shaped like a girl. Apparently, I started groping about with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so terrified that he yanked me out of the home. Though we bring it up every now and again and we remain friends, the narrative itself never changes, and it still makes me shudder. I have never experienced such gloom or coldness in my life thus far. It was almost sticky. I couldn't get rid of this disturbing sensation for a few days after, and I never could stroll by that house once more. When I was a child, I lived in an old Victorian house. It was big and creaky. At night, I always heard laughing while I tried to sleep. It was soft, but clear. It came from the hallway. I was an only child. I lived with my mother. There was no one else in the house. When I was about 5 or 6, I started waking up to the laughter every night. It scared me. It sounded like children giggling, but I knew there were no other kids. I told my mother. She said it was nothing. She told me the TV was probably left on. I wanted to believe her, but I knew the sound came from the hallway, not from the TV. One night, I woke up again. But the laughter, this time, was not in the hallway. It was in my room. It was close. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't. Something was holding me down. I felt hands pressing into my shoulders. But there was no one there. I could feel fingers digging into my skin. I couldn't move. The laughter grew louder. Louder. It filled my ears. I was frozen in fear. Then I screamed. My mom ran into my room. She turned on the light. The laughter stopped. I could move again. I sat up, shaking, crying. She hugged me. She told me it was just a bad dream. But it wasn't. My shoulders hurt, I whispered. She pulled up my t-shirt. Her face changed. She went pale. She didn't say anything at first, she just stared. Then, she took a deep breath and whispered, "It's okay." I didn't understand at the time, but I know now. There were 2 adult-sized handprints on my shoulders. The next morning, the marks were gone. My mother never talked about it again. She avoided the subject whenever I brought it up. Over time, I started convincing myself that maybe it was a dream. Maybe I imagined it. Years later, I mentioned it again. I was older now. I laughed and said, "Do you remember when I thought a ghost grabbed me?" I expected her to laugh too. Instead, she went quiet. Her face turned white. She looked at me with wide eyes. Then, she said in a low voice, "I don't want to remember that." That's when I knew it was real.